Just ahead on UCF Metro Center Outlook, newly arrived Lynx CEO John Lewis could be facing bigger transit challenges than he bargained for.
This program is made possible by funding from the UCF Metropolitan Center for Regional Studies, where government leaders, business executives, and academic experts come together to discuss major issues facing the state of Florida.
Hello everyone, welcome to UCF Metro Center Outlook. I'm Diane Trees, Director of the UCF Metropolitan Center for Regional Studies. Public transit is seen by many as critical to Central Florida's economic development, but the game board keeps changing, creating a significant challenge for Lynx CEO John Lewis. I'll be talking to John about Lynx and its future just ahead, but first, Alicia Callanan-Mandigo explores some of the innovative steps Lynx has taken to boost its ridership and its image.
It's a simple food joint with a simple menu, but the Lynx Cafe is innovative in its own way. It's a novel approach for bringing in extra revenue, one of several recent changes Lynx has made in an effort to keep things moving forward. Spikes in gas prices in recent years have triggered spikes in ridership. But commuters looking for a green alternative might also be eyeing the bus. Lynx is the first transit agency in the country to own and blend its own biodiesel fuel. It burns so cleanly, bus mufflers show no signs of emissions. The entire fleet is running on biodiesel. Limo, downtown Orlando's free bus rapid transit system, runs hybrid buses. Introduced in the late 1990s, Limo still stands as the nation's model for BRT. In 2010, it carried over 1,120,000 passengers. As the region moves forward, successful transit systems are proving key to economic development.
We think they're extremely important. When we did the downtown transportation plan in 2005, the numbers indicated that we needed a transportation solution that was not car or automobile based, and so we really took advantage of the successes that we had with Limo to kind of look out, to 2015 to 2030 to see what opportunities we might have to take that system and expand it.
Limo's eventual expansion will be downtown, but UCF gave Lynx its first expansion of the BRT concept. Night Lynx is a partnership between Lynx and UCF student government. It drew 3,400 users during its first 2 months of operation.
That figure far exceeds our expectations. In comparable programs such as the Night Knoll as well as the Later Gator, they've really haven't hit those numbers in their first semester. So we had a goal of only 1,000 for this semester, and we hit that in the first 3 weeks.
Night Lynx, Limo, and even the Lynx Cafe are about improving convenience.
Let's say the weather is a little dicey, and you'd like to know exactly what time the bus is going to be at the bus stop. Well, Lynx is working on an app for that.
Just as Lynx is rethinking the wait at the bus stop, it's rethinking the bus entirely.
The one thing that our CEO, John Lewis, is really looking at is putting the right size bus in the right size area.
This sporty pink and yellow bus is the answer. It's a pilot program called Pickup. Operational costs are a fraction of the standard bus, and it meets the convenience criteria.
So these pickup lines, it's call ahead service. You call ahead 2 hours in advance to arrange your pickup, and it goes in a small radius, a central area, and it'll connect you to the nearest fixed route service, or it'll take you to your Publix, it'll take you to your grocery store, it'll take you to a doctor's office, as long as it's in that particular area.
Some of these systems are working very well for Lynx, but transit is a complicated equation, and it's hard to predict what will ultimately entice people to park their cars. Alicia Callanan-Mandigo for Metro Center Outlook.
As gas prices go up, so does ridership. But in some areas, higher gas prices also mean higher bus fares. Joining me now to talk about the finer details of these issues is Lynx CEO John Lewis. John, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You have a service, Lynx, that covers 3 counties, Osceola, Orange, and Seminole counties. You also run a service that's Limo, and it's a BRT, a bus rapid transit. Now that's a different system. Can you explain a little bit about what makes it distinctive?
Sure. Our bus rapid transit systems really are modeled after a method of public transit that has been used in Europe and South America and Asia for decades now. We're a little bit behind the curve in that, but the wonderful thing about it is that Orlando, for North America, was one of the first systems to pioneer bus rapid transit. What you get from bus rapid transit, what really makes it different, is that you get the elements and the convenience and the reliability of rail without having to make the investment in laying rail, power stations, and building the infrastructure necessary to run a rail line. The great thing about BRT is that you can have, particularly BRT systems like we have here in downtown Orlando, where you have dedicated lanes, so you don't have to worry about traffic, just like a rail line. You have smaller stations where we will have the ability for our customers, if they needed to be able to pay fares, to get information, and to be out of the elements, and to have reliable places where our vehicles will stop. And then to be able to have quick, efficient, and effective and reliable movement along that corridor. The great thing about Limo is that being out of the traffic, we don't have to worry about the incidents that may happen or the vagaries of operating in an urban area. It keeps us on time. It's a very consistent service. At red lights, we have the ability through technology. We have prioritization with the signals. So we have a very reliable time system on that service, which makes it much more attractive to choice riders.
I believe it was also just recently recognized nationally for its success. When this was introduced, and I believe it was 95 or 97, I read that your ridership actually doubled. Is it perhaps a better model for public transit?
I think it is. It's a different model. And one of the things that public transit in North America is struggling with, outside of the huge congested areas, and I'm talking about New York, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, and DC, where congestion is so bad that people just have to make use of public transit in order to have any kind of reliability. But in areas like Orlando, where congestion's an issue, but there are other options around, we have to make sure that public transit provides many different options to people. Now, public transit does a great job in providing service for the core riders, and those are people who, either by choice or by economic circumstance, don't either have chosen not to have a vehicle or can't afford a vehicle. Then they have the ability to move around on public transit. But if we're going to add value to the community, to the greater community, we have to be able to provide a service that is attractive to the choice rider. And that's the individual who, for a trip or for as a household decision, has one or multiple vehicles. And then they have to make a choice between how they're going to move for either that work trip, that medical trip, or that entertainment trip.
You just started a new service, and that's Night Lynx. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The Night Lynx is a great partnership between Lynx and University of Central Florida. The thing that I love so much about it is that it was brought to our attention by the students. And I think that really is what makes it such a great opportunity. For Lynx, it's more ridership, which is great, helps our bottom line. But really, what is intriguing about it is that it shows that next generation, the Gen Y group, really is looking at public transit as an added value to their community, to their lifestyles, and are looking to enhance those services.
Different than someone from my generation.
Very different.
Perception of bus transit, not that Lynx is, but a lot of times it's more that buses are noisy or unreliable or slower, where you're gearing this towards a generation that's going to have a whole different perspective.
I think you're exactly right. I was talking with a group of youngsters and asking about what their thoughts were about the future moving on. I remember way back when I was turning 16, the first thing that I wanted was to go get my license. Well, that's no longer the big issue for 16-year-olds. They may get it at some point, but when you look at highway statistics, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, 1 out of 2 15-and-a-half-year-olds would have their license by the time they were 16. Now it's 1 in 4. And so those values and those characteristics are changing. And I think we're seeing some of that in the interest from UCF students in public transit. They're not so tied to the car. They are much more sustainable and green conscious. They're much more environmentally aware, and they're looking for alternative means of transportation. And that's really the challenge for public transit systems, to meet that need as we go.
Yes, exactly. We talked a little bit about, in the video, biodiesel fuel, and you have one of the only transit agencies in the nation that owns, operates, produces on demand biodiesel fuel. Why is that so special?
Well, I think that was a great decision that was made by previous leadership and our board of directors. And I think that's what makes Central Florida so unique, that you have such a forward-thinking, strategically minded group of elected officials and community leaders that know what they want this community to be. And quality of life and sustainable environmental decisions are very high on their list of priorities. And for public transit, I've always said that transit was green before it was cool to be green, in terms of the numbers of people that we move. But now we have to take it beyond that. We have to walk the walk, not just talk it. And we have to be very conscious of the impact that our vehicles have on the environment. And Lynx board made the investment in hybrid vehicles, but along the way also made a very cutting edge decision to make sure that we had sustainable, consistent blends in our biodiesel. Now, biodiesel is not new to the industry. I made use of it in the previous system where I was in Richmond, but we weren't able to continue with it because we couldn't get consistent blends. You know, we get a great batch and it would work fine, and then the next batch wouldn't be so consistent, and we had problems with our filters and transmissions and the engines. What this enables Lynx to do is, by fueling and mixing the grades themselves, we're guaranteed that we will have the same consistency in our fueling system.
You have control over it.
We have control, and that was a great decision.
That's okay. I also saw that it reduces CO2 emissions by 16%. And the other fact that I thought was interesting, if we have a hurricane, you can use 100% biodiesel fuel for limited times if the supply for fuel was cut off. So that would still keep you running a bus system if we had to have some emergency service.
Absolutely.
I thought that was, with our climate unpredictability, I thought that was an excellent backup plan. So
absolutely, and again, the leadership at Lynx, prior to me getting here, made great decisions in that. And you never want to underestimate the impact that availability of fuel can have, not only on our system, but our ability to provide service. And in the instance of that kind of emergency, we'll be able to provide lower levels of service, but we'll still be able to be there acting in the community in the roles that we need.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about funding. How is Lynx currently funded?
Lynx is funded almost just like a government agency. Each year we have to go to our funding partners, the City of Orlando, Orange County, Osceola, and Seminole County, and let them know, here's the level of service that you're interested in having within your jurisdictions, and here's the cost of that. And I have to go with my hat in my hand and beg for that money. Now, we have great relationships with our partners, and they've been, even through these tough economic times, they have been very keen on holding the level of service and not having it cut back significantly. But that's a challenge. It's a challenge for us from a systematic standpoint, and it lowers our ability to plan long term because we don't have assurance of what funding levels will be, and ultimately it's not going to be a sustainable model. In this region, really has to have a serious conversation very soon about how we fund public transit in the long term.
That is a question that I have heard for a number of years about the need for a dedicated funding source. Some options have been presented. A gas tax increase, and currently it's 7% in Osceola and Seminole counties. It's a 6-cent tax in Orange County. Another option has been putting a $2 a day surcharge on rental cars. That's come up with the state legislature, not been passed a couple of times. A third option might be to have each county adopt a sales tax increase and a portion go to funding. How do you feel about those options? Are there other ways to do this, or?
I think they're all viable options, and I think we really, as a community, need to have that discussion with not only our elected officials, with our riders, and with the community as a whole. The great thing about Central Florida is we've taken great steps forward in figuring out what the vision for this community will be. We've had the discussions around how shall we grow, so the community knows where it wants to go. Now we have the real tough aspects of it and the details of figuring out how we get there. And developing a sustainable, dedicated funding source for transit is very important. Whether it's sales tax, gas tax, or the rental car surcharge, all of those are good models. We just have to figure out which is best for this community.
Looking across at different systems across the country, there have been a lot of challenges, even for the successful ones. For example, Phoenix, I read, took 3 times before they were able to pass a sales tax. You recently took a trip to Salt Lake City. They have a phenomenal rail and bus system, and you were able to ride that, talk with the local leadership that gave some feedback on the challenges, the pitfalls. When you came back, you tweeted, I read, that you were very energized and excited about the trip. What did you bring back from that experience?
Well, I think that for me personally, it gave us a unique opportunity to see, sort of take a glimpse into the future and get a chance to see what we could be and what the future has in store for Central Florida. The other thing is really talking with our colleagues, with the elected officials, and with riders of the system. As we were out riding along their light rail and their commuter rail and their bus system, many of us had the opportunity to just talk with the average citizen there. And it was very clear that that community looks at public transit as a part of the overall fabric of their quality of life. They don't have huge issues with congestion, but they know what they want their community to be and how important quality of life is to them. And they realize that they were on a track where if they didn't do things differently, they would be like some of the other communities on the West Coast where congestion and air quality were impacting and would constrain their ability to make certain decisions in the future. So they were very proactive, and they found a method through public transit to be able to set their community up for success in the future. And what was incredible about it, it was a tough fight, and it was a tough journey. But once people were able to see, once that first rail line was laid, and once they were able to really touch it and feel it and make use of it, everything else has been accelerated. They have 5 other rail lines under construction, and that program was an accelerated program. They were looking at a 25 to 30-year construction program. Now that their citizens have said, we want it now, we're willing to tax ourselves to pay for it, but this is so important to our community, we want to make sure that happens. And that was what was the most important thing for me personally to take out. That when you lay out a very clear vision of where you want to go, how you want to be there, and what benefit it will show, not only to the riders, but to the community as a whole, people will buy into it and will be willing to support it.
We do know that we will not have high-speed rail. How has that impacted your plans for Lynx?
Well, I think it really was an unfortunate decision for the state of Florida as a whole. High-speed rail really would not have had an impact on the day-to-day operations of Lynx. But I think in terms of building infrastructure and supporting a new world economy, when we're talking about competing on a global basis, we're no longer just competing with Tampa or Atlanta or Charlotte. We're competing with Beijing and Stockholm and London and Paris. These are places where in Asia and in China, they're expending billions and billions of dollars on infrastructure because they know the impact that being able to move people and goods reliably has on their ability to compete worldwide. And the same is happening in Europe. I see this as the next, just as my parents did in the 50s, in the late 40s and 50s with the construction of the National Highway System, which just finished completion in the late 80s, early 90s. And so this is a long-term issue, an infrastructure issue that keep us competitive as a nation. Now, for Central Florida, I think it would have been a great boost ahead, not only for individuals who have to deal with congestion, but it shrinks our communities. It moves people and goods much faster than we're able to do otherwise, and I think it would have put us a little more ahead. For Lynx, we were excited to be a supplement to that system, to be able to get people from their homes, from their jobs, from other areas to that spine, to that high-speed rail system. I think it was unfortunate we were unable to do that, but I really believe that it's going to happen. Infrastructure projects like that, progress like that can't be stopped.
And I
it can be delayed. But
we are looking at ourselves as more of a super region, and the I-4 corridor and actually connecting from coast to coast all across Central Florida. So that makes perfect sense, that the necessity for a rail system.
Absolutely. It would have made us stronger, not just for today, but for the next generation.
For the next generation. Sunrail is now on hold. I'm sure that affects your planning abilities and your ability to be prepared if and when we do get Sunrail involved. How are you still planning, making strides for this?
We are working as if Sunrail is going to happen. I believe that is really key to the day-to-day quality of life of people in this region. My office sits right on the I-4 corridor, and each and every day I look outside and see our colleagues, our friends, our brothers and sisters who are struggling with the congestion along that corridor. Sunrail can be an important tool to help relieve that congestion, provide another tool in the toolbox, and help to keep that high quality of life for Central Florida. And Lynx is working diligently day-to-day to make sure that those connections are seamless and reliable.
John, I don't think a lot of people are aware of how much is already in place in terms of connectivity, because a rail system will only be effective is when you get off the platform, you have a way to get to your final destination. You have been planning, there are things already in effect, a lot of transit-oriented development. Can you fill in some of the gaps here? Because I honestly believe people are not aware of all that you've done.
I think in order for Sunrail to be successful ultimately, and for the public transit system in this region to be successful, it has to meet several engines. Reliability, and Sunrail will do that because it's on its own right of way, but seamless transfers from that rail station. That rail system will get you from one community to the next, but it's not going to get you to your final destination. And our challenge is we have to make sure that when that individual gets off of that train, that a Lynx vehicle is there, that it's an easy decision to make. You're not worried about when I'm going to get there, how I'm going to get there, where's it going to drop me off. It's got to be intuitive, it's got to be easy to use, and it's got to be reliable. And we're working very hard to ensure that. We are planning to acquire new vehicles. We're already planning the expansion of our bus rapid transit in the downtown area. All of that over the next 5 to 10 years is centered on complementing the spine of Sunrail.
John, you faced some similar problems when you were in Richmond, Virginia. Your system there was about half the size of Lynx, but you had no dedicated funding source, you had union issues, and you were facing cutbacks in service. You bring things that you must have learned that you can utilize here in Orlando. What have you brought back from your experience with Richmond?
Well, I think the experience that I had in Richmond it taught me one thing. You've just got to be tenacious, and you've got to continue to move forward with it. It's about adding value to the community. And I think we're in a much better situation here. As I was considering making this move, the one thing that really caught my attention was how well this region works together across jurisdictional lines. And that is an attribute that unfortunately many other communities don't have. So we are a little bit ahead of the game here. There's no question between government entities. We're planning for Sunrail, we're planning for the future, and government entities are working together. Now, what we have to do is convince the community that we're on the right path. And that is the story that we're telling. That's the story we're going to continue to tell. And as I stated to the board in my final interview, I'd love to be a cheerleader for that, and I have no problem doing that. It's about having those conversations.
You talked about finding that when you came to Orlando that we are working together. You've not been here that long, but is there anything about Lynx that you've encountered that is now a higher priority that you didn't expect before you came?
Absolutely. I think, number one, Lynx was a great organization before anyone ever heard of John Lewis, and I have great respect for my predecessor, Linda Watson. She was a great leader, and I wish her well in Texas. But I think where we need to sort of work around the edges is Lynx does a phenomenal job in moving the transit dependent. And that's that group that I mentioned before that either by choice or economic circumstance don't have access to vehicles and so rely on public transit for all of their transportation needs. Lynx has done a great job providing service to them. But in order for us to be successful in the long run, we've got to be able to attract the choice rider. That's that individual who has a choice on how they move from one place to the other. And for us to ultimately be successful, and I keep saying it to my employees and to our board, my goal and my measure of success will be when Lynx becomes the mode of choice rather than mode of last resort. And when Central Floridians start thinking about when they're going to work, when they're going to the grocery store, or they're going to for social visits, when Lynx is a part of that thought process, then we will ultimately be successful.
When it's
and
our culture.
When it's our culture. And we are redesigning some of our service in order to meet those needs. Express service. One of the detractors is our bus routes stop at every block along a corridor, and it takes quite a long time. If you're living in a suburban area and time and efficiency is a big issue. And so if you're going to stop every block, you can get there faster in your car. But by using express service as an example, where we go from a park and ride with 1 or 2 stops intervening and into the final destination, whether it's downtown or across jurisdictions, then you might give that a thought.
John, I have so many questions. We're out of time. I thank you for being here today and part of the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I've been talking to Lynx CEO John Lewis about the challenges ahead as he helps to strengthen and expand Central Florida's public transportation system. I think we can all agree that time is running out for our dependence on fossil fuels. But what is the right option? Do we maintain the status quo with traffic congestion and rising gas prices? Or do we take a gamble and invest public and private money in a bus and commuter rail system that will cost us millions? That's all we have time for today. I'm Diane Trees, Director of the UCF Metropolitan Center for Regional Studies. I'm going to leave you today with an invitation to please visit UCF Metro Center's new interactive website. Use it to learn more about our area's economic development and to give me feedback on the issues that are important to you. Thank you for joining me today.
This program is made possible by funding from the UCF Metropolitan Center for Regional Studies, where government leaders, business executives, and academic experts come together to discuss major issues facing the state of Florida.